Hi guys, and welcome to this Wednesday workshop, live from London. I'm James, founder at Bamboo Bicycle Club, and for those of you building at home or are interested in building a bamboo bicycle, our Wednesday workshops are here to give you a little bit of a guide of how to do things, so hints and tips and short tutorials. Today I'm going to talk about flax fibre, which is this stuff here. So it's the material that we use to join the bicycle together. And here's an example of flax here on the frame, so the joint section of our frames. We also use carbon fibre as well. And what I'm going to run through today are just some hints and tips of how to use flax fibre and how to use resins and what to look out for. So it's going to be a little bit more of a talk and a how-to guide than an action tutorial today. But I'm sure if you're working at home, sometimes it can feel a bit daunting to work with resins and flax and so on if you've never done it before. So that's what I'm going to run through. Obviously, if you want to see other tutorials, last week we did how to fit bottle cages. The week before we did internal cabling. You can check out our YouTube channel or on Instagram, or we're also on Facebook. So you can check out all of those channels and see previous videos, and they're on our website as well for those of you not on social media. So flax fibre, which is this material here, just to give you a bit of a background, it's a composite material, so it's a cloth, so it's a dual directional weave, and it's grown and then processed into this cloth, and there's no finishing on it, so there's no dyes, there's no any processing to the cloth, so it's a raw flax fibre as it's known. And what we use is a dual directional weave, so you've got a weave going this way and then you've got a weave cross sectioning that way. And the big benefit of a dual directional weave is obviously when you're laying it up onto your frame, you end up with a more complex matrix. So it's already got a weave within it, and then the matrix becomes more complex. So you can see, I'll bring that close to the camera, that's just a scrap bit I've got there. So you can see it's a dual directional weave bit of cloth there. You do get other types of flax. So if you understand carbon fibre, there's loads of different types of loads of different grades of carbon fibre, and the same with flax. So you have different weights and you have different weaves, okay? And obviously, depending how you want the bicycle to perform, you can use different weaves in different areas and so on. What we use is we use a 400 GSM, which is quite a heavy weave on all our kits, and it's a great material to learn with. And if you're not familiar with flax, it's really easy to use. It maintains its shape really well, so it doesn't disintegrate as you work with it, and it allows you to very quickly build up a matrix. I'll show you an example of a single weave there. So that's a thinner, and that's a one directional weave there, so you can see it's a bit thinner. So that's another type of flax I've got there that you can use. One of the reasons why we use flax fibre is because, so if you're just joining guys, this is a live workshop just about flax fibre and how to use it. One of the reasons why we use flax fibre is because it's got really, really good dampening quality, so it smoothens out the ride even more, so it's really good for comfort on your frame, and often on things like surfboards and things like that it can be used, and it's also used in skiing, and it can also be combined with other materials like carbon fibre. And what the flax will do is it will create a much smoother feel to that product. So it's a really good at naturally dampening vibrations, so that's really good for a bicycle. What's also quite important for us is that it's sustainable. So in terms of the way it's grown and the way it's processed, it's got a low carbon footprint. And I think moving forward, any materials we use, for products, that's really important that we try and use sustainable materials. And if you look at comparisons, things like fiberglass and carbon fibre, there's a lot of processes that go into making those materials. So the sustainability is very questionable. Whereas with flax, we know it's grown locally, so this is all grown within the UK, and it's also grown a lot in France as well. So we know it can be grown locally, sourced locally, and processed locally, so that's really useful. The other really nice thing to do is when I'm touching it and you know, laying it up, I'm not getting any skin irritation like you would with fiberglass, and it's not going to cause cancer like carbon fibre would. So it's a really nice material to work with, especially if you're building at home with your kit or anything, you know, and you want a nice material to work with. So that's why we use it. So if you're just using this if you're just joining this workshop Wednesday, I'm talking about flax fibre, and I'm just talking through some hints and tips of how to use it. Okay. So I've just talked about why we use flax fibre. We're talking about sustainability, natural dampening, and we know it can also be combined with other materials like Kevlar and carbon fibre to help with vibration dampening as well. So it's a really interesting material to create products from. So what I'm going to talk about now is how you use it for a bicycle. And what we recommend for our kits is that you cut it into thin strips. Okay, so I'm just going to grab some scissors. So if you take some scissors, we recommend you take the cloth and you cut it into thin strips. Okay, and I'm just going to cut this into a thin strip for you just so you get an idea. Because we provide a metre length, so you'll have a long metre length, and we recommend you cut it into single strips. The technique you use when you're building one of our bicycles is known as a hand layup. So you're using your hands and you're going to apply resin. So I've got some resin here just to show you. You apply resin onto the cloth and then you wrap it around the joint. So that's known as a hand layup. If you want to learn more about creating composites, so things like your tennis rackets, your bicycles, aeroplanes, they're all made out of composites. If you want to learn a bit more about them, the other techniques for using them are things like a vacuum form or a mould layup. But what we're going to use is a hand layup. So you can cross-reference and research some of these techniques that I'm talking about. So once you cut your strip, you then wet the resin through, okay? Now, this is where, and this is a big hint for everyone working at home, this is where you can make a mistake, okay? So when you're working with epoxy resins, and this is what turns the flax into a composite, this is what joins it. With an epoxy resin, you've got two parts. You've got the epoxy here and you've got the hardener here. And what you have to understand is that when those two elements come together, it is a chemical reaction. The two parts are combining to harden and to form a composite. Now, the mistake you're most likely to make with the glue, okay? You need a ratio cup, so you need the right ratio of these. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So for example, I would use 100 grams of this one, 50 grams of this one. And that needs to be measured precisely each time. So if you just join, and this is a live workshop about using biocomposites and using flax and resins. Okay? So make sure that you measure out the ratio of the epoxy resin very carefully. The other big thing to remember is that you need to stir the epoxy resin well, okay? And when I say stir, you want to fold the epoxy resin over itself. So like you're folding a souffle, okay? If you whisk it really fast, you'll reduce the pot life and it will react too quickly. So you want to fold. And when you fold, you want to at least do it for about 2 minutes. Folding the resin through and making sure it's mixed thoroughly. If it is not mixed correctly, or if the measurement is not correct, it will never ever set. And when you get onto your bicycle, it won't work, okay? So be really thorough when you mix the glue. And I see it sometimes in workshops, people get really excited, they want to finish their bikes, they're working away really quickly, and they forget to mix the glue. So just take your time and make sure you mix that correctly. Going back to the flax, so we recommend you cut it into strips, okay? And then what we do is on your bike frame, which I've got here, so this is a finished bike frame, so you can see all these connections are made out of flax, and then this has been painted with a paint finish. You'll take your strips of flax, and they tend to be a bit longer than what I've got here, and you would wrap it around the frame. And the reason why you wrap it around the frame like that, and you create different types of weaves and different directions, is that you build up and you create a more complex matrix. So each time a layer goes over itself, the matrix becomes more complex, and then that bonds better and better each time. So you get a stronger and stronger bond. And this allows the material then to hold in place. So you'd wrap around here, and so on. And what you ideally want with the type of cloth you're using, so this 400 GSM, you ideally, where you've got high load areas on the frame, so things like where the fork go in, and things like where the bottom bracket go in, and so on, you want 3 layers of flax around those core areas, and that's going to give you the right stiffness for your frame. Okay? And especially when you're wrapping in alternate directions, you want to make sure that you build up the layers around these core stress areas here. Okay. The other thing to be really careful of is that when you're using the resin, make sure that you cover the cloth with the resin. So make sure that the cloth is saturated through. And what I tend to do is I tend to put a brown paper on the table, lay out my cloth, and then I brush very carefully the resin all the way through the cloth, and I often put 3 or 4 layers on top of each other, like so, and then that allows me, any excess glue will soak through to the cloth beneath. Okay? And making sure the cloth is saturated is really important, because otherwise it's not going to bond correctly. You also want to take away any excess, so when I'm working I tend to wring the cloth out, making sure that the fibres are fully impregnated with the glue, and that any excess resin is then taken off. You don't want excess resin because it's going to add weight and you're going to have more voids in your join. So just remove any excess resin before you work. Okay, so that's a very brief workshop about how to work with flax, why we use it, and some tips and tricks. Okay. If you've got any questions about the method that we use, there are some other videos on our YouTube that show the exact method of how you wrap and how you work. And if you'd like a workshop on it, do let me know, and I can do it as a Wednesday workshop, so I can show a specific join, how I finish one join at a time, or I can show you a bit more around working with composites. So thank you ever so much for joining me today if you're live. And if you're catching up, thanks very much as well. Please like and subscribe, and if you've got any comments to make, let me know. This is a community project. It's about the involvement of everyone, and I'm here just to try and share some of the knowledge that I have or that I've learned from others. So please get involved and let me know what workshops you'd like to see, and if you've got any questions around this. Thanks ever so much for joining me. Have a good rest of the week. Bye for now.